Whilst I have no malice against the seller, unfortunately I have to rate this 2 stars. The robot modes are okay, and the vehicle modes are good, but honestly the combined mode cancels it all out. You don't buy a combiner for the vehicles. You just don't. Yes, it's a high 2 stars and almost 3, but I can't in good conscience recommend this. So I suppose the question is he better than Hulky? You know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say yes, simply because of the price. A figure should be able to fill its price point through fun factor and engineering, and unfortunately Hulky doesn't fill in that $200 to $300 price tag. At the Voyager size, he's simply lacking in way too much articulation. I've harped on this thing for oh so long, and I think it's time I finally put it to rest. Twice now this thing has been beaten at its own game. Once by Hasbro and Takara, and once now by Iron Factory. There's just no reason to cling to this lifeless husk anymore. When I combined Hulky for the first time, I was met with shame. But for $50 extra, when I combined War Giant, I was met with wonder and awe. Price isn't the only reason of its failure. And now that Iron Factory has proven that Legends Combiner can work, it's time we moved forward onto brighter and better things, like that Magic Square Menasor. So let's talk about DX9 Hulky again. Now yes, I'm aware I've harped on this thing time and time and time again, but this time, I think it's time to put an end to it for real. I know a lot of you really disagree with me, but honestly, I'm not that big of a fan of Hulky. A lot of people say that he was brilliant for the time, but if you consider what else came out at the time, such as Iron Factory Evil Lord, he just isn't up to scratch. Yes, he is the first proper third-party Legends combiner, but still, they could have taken some cues from the other third-party combiners and the concurrent Combiner Wars figures. Hell, it doesn't even hold up that well next to the Energon combiners. And don't forget that Hasbro already failed with the Bruticus, so they could have at least learned from some of those mistakes. You know what one of those mistakes was? Parts forming. Now, I know that's one of the things people really like the Combiner for, but still, just because you get rid of parts forming doesn't make it good. It has to be a good toy on its own. So yes, it's not a very good toy, and even though the KOs do make it a bit cheaper, still not really a worthy purchase. However, a few months ago I came across an upgrade kit on the Transformers Collectors Club Australia boards. Now you might have first come across this kit on the TFW boards, but whatever the case, I was drawn to this kit. I thought that maybe, just maybe, I could bring out the potential in Hulky and make him the combiner that he was truly meant to be. So, does this kit make him a worthwhile purchase? Well, yes and no. But enough beating around the green and purple bush. It's been exactly 2 years since I released my original DX9 Hulky review, and I think it's time to return to this deeply flawed toy. Greetings Cybertronians, I'm Dr. Lockdown, and today's diagnosis pertains to the Studio Ox-inspired DX9 Hulky upgrade, produced by Jessalyn Bell. Okay, so before we get into the meat and potatoes of the review, a bit of housekeeping is required. The version for sale and the version I'll be discussing today is version 2. In contrast to the original version, the, spine, I suppose, is one solid black piece. Certain images of the original version depicted in 4 separate runners featuring a green section. This section doesn't exist on the second one because it's far more economical, so don't get confused. Furthermore, the way this kit is installed requires this peg at the back here to be properly aligned with hook during transformation. Now my copy in particular was not printed on Shapeways with their fancy high-tech printers, but instead printed by Jessalyn herself as a test for the eventual final product. As such, my copy was somewhat malformed due to the cheaper printing process, and I had to shave off just a teensy amount of plastic to get it to fit. Depending on how Shapeways prints things, you may or may not have to do the same. Think of this as a test shot, and as such I'd love owners of this kit to comment below and tell me what their experience is with the final version. Finally, this is a 3D printed kit, and as such it will require some assembly. I did not assemble this myself, but according to Jessalyn, no glue or screws are required. They're all held in by friction, so you may need a hammer for assembly. I'm sure most of you will have access to a hammer at home, no not that one, but if you're missing one I suggest a quick trip to Bunnings.
I have no memory of this place.
Right, so what do you get with this kit? Once assembled, you should have all 3 pieces that will fix 99% of Hulky's problems. The main piece is this skeletal section, with new thighs and a spine to lock into long haul and hook in a rather secure manner. Right off the bat, the thighs have much more posability than the static lower section of long haul. Although the knees only bend slightly more than the original, it's already an incredible improvement. I also really enjoy how the backs of the knees have fake ratchet gears in there. They're purely decorative, but it complements the DX9 aesthetic quite well. You'll notice there's some pegs on the back of the spine. In case you're confused by the asymmetry, they are supposed to be like that. The legs are purposely designed to wrap around here, so that the new thighs can take their place. The other two parts that make up this set are the forearm fillers. I imagine these are going to be somewhat of a controversial point, but trust me, in the end it's a much better choice overall. Every time I try to harp on Hulky online, the same argument is always used.
Well, there's just not a parts former.
I already covered this in my original review, in detail no less, but I'll state it again I suppose. Already we have to deal with parts forming hands, so the notion that this combiner doesn't parts form is ludicrous. And yes, you can leave the hands in place for the vehicle and robot modes, but even then, parts forming benefits the combiner. The only difference in what I said then and what I'm saying now is that now we have physical evidence. Not only is Zeta pushing the envelope in combiners today, especially with their character choices, but we can also see the positive of a parts-forming combiner at this scale in the form of Iron Factory's War Giant. This Bruticus feels way more solid and cohesive in his combined mode, and yet still people cling to the dated notion that combiners are better if they're all-inclusive. Yes, some cases of parts forming are stupid as all hell, and yes, an all-inclusive combiner is a nice feature, but if it comes at the cost of cohesion, well, I just can't justify it. But beyond the controversy, what do these pieces actually provide to the overall experience? Well, we'll just have to combine him to find out. Now, whilst most of the components that form Devastator can combine just normally in their regularly combined modes or combined ready modes, Longhaul has a completely different transformation to wrap around the torso piece, so you're going to want to leave him in robot mode and just leave the rest as is. So just getting these out of the way, first thing you want to do is make sure the head is completely around, you want to make sure the arms are out of the way, and you want to bring the side skirts around like you would to normally combine him. But this is where things get a little interesting. You take these two pegs here and these two slots here, and then the entire section pegs together with the head facing the back there. From here, you just bring these down, these twist and fold around to the sides, they bend up. If everything's lined up properly, it should all peg together on the back section there, and the rest just combines as normal. Hook pegs on exactly the same way, except this slot will peg into this peg here. The arms are the same, but instead of having whatever was at the back here, it's now this. As usual, it's best to get these two pegs in first, slot it over the back there. Then you just kind of take these arms, make sure that the hook parts are facing the top here, and they just kind of fold into the chest. They don't really peg in anywhere, but they do end up looking the part. The arms peg in as normal, regardless of how weak the connections are. And one thing you've got to do is make sure that the head here is folded in, because in the original video, I forgot to do that. Finally, you may recall that in the original video, I commented on how the forearms had more articulation if they were facing the wrong way. Well, this takes advantage of that, because you've got two clips here and two slots here, and it all slots together. Do be careful of these pieces though, they are very fragile given their 3D printed nature, so that just clicks into place there, and it's very solid. I wasn't expecting it to be that solid. And the rest with the hands is pretty simple. And there we go, Studio Ox-styled Devastator from DX9 and Jessalyn Bell. And oh mama, he's a looker. So, we're finally here. The last chance to see if Hulky is a worthwhile purchase. Can this upgrade kit truly make him the combiner he was meant to be? Well, yes and no. I truly think this kit makes him a much better figure overall. The kit easily takes him from a 2-star combiner to a 3-star one, just hinging on the edge of a solid 4 score. Right off the bat, the aesthetics are amazingly improved. The heavy leaning into the Studio Ox aesthetic does wonders for the figure. The mechanical detail exhibited in the thighs blends seamlessly into the robot design, despite my copy being riddled with 3D printing layering artifacts, or whatever they're supposed to be called. The grey thighs is probably my favourite design choice, as it finally spices up the colour scheme. Call me crazy, but I've always preferred the silver thighs to the green ones, more commonly associated with Toon-style Dev-A. The articulation here is also greatly improved. Thanks to the ball joints, you now have access to proper thigh swivels. Well, almost proper. It's a tad limited thanks to the ball joints, but compared to how static the thighs on the original were, I'll take it. Just moving on up! Yes, Longhaul's arms don't technically peg into anywhere, but somehow they never feel out of place. You really have to be deliberately looking for bad angles to notice it. The good thing about this kit is that it doesn't elongate the torso into an MP45 nightmare. The torso remains the same length, with girth being added to the arms to emphasize that anime aesthetic. On top of that, the arm add-ons seem ridiculous in concept, but in practice they look absolutely incredible. Out of all Hulky's poor aesthetic choices, this is what I hated the most. Finally giving him proper arms has essentially perfected the aesthetic of the figure, and surprisingly using the same fists doesn't look jarring. Yes, the fists are still garbage thanks to their poor tab placement, but with these I find he no longer needs them. He's perfectly fine as is now. So, what does this kit improve? Well, it perfects the aesthetic, and at the very least it makes the articulation adequate. He may not scale with the upcoming Legends combiners from Iron Factory and Magic Square, but at the very least he looks the part. So, does this kit make him a worthwhile purchase? Unfortunately, there's only much the kit can do. The robot modes still have their individual quirks, and it's been 2 years. We've moved on since then. He was already overpriced for the time, and now with the Devastator from Magic Square in the works, there's just no need for him anymore. He may have been the first third-party Legends combiner, and no one can ever take that away from him, but at the end of the day, he's not nostalgic, he's just dated, and not in a charming way. Yes, I might be able to recommend him at a discounted knockoff price. I've heard decent things about the quality of said knockoffs, but even then, this is a 3D printed kit, and it's gonna cost you. It's not the fault of the kit. Jesslyn Bell has done some truly amazing things with designing this upgrade set, but at the end of the day, the damage has been done. The third-party Legends game has changed now, with a very different playing field in use. Hulky is sadly just a relic from another time, and although that time may provide a nostalgic yearning, it's not something you can go back to. With all that doom and gloom said though, I still wholeheartedly recommend this kit overall. Yes, I still can't recommend the original combiner, especially with the Magic Square version coming out soon, but, you know, most of the 3P Legends scene doesn't really listen to my opinion anyway. Despite my best efforts to educate people about how flawed he is, he remains as popular as ever, simply due to the iconography of the character, and I kinda get that, but at the same time, you can always just wait for a better Legends Devastator. There's not going to be any shortage of him in the next few years. Usually I don't partake in Legends knockoffs simply because 1, they usually get upscaled, and 2, well, why don't just get the original? And often a lot of the knockoffs are of inferior quality. However, I have heard good things about the Mech Fans Toys version of Hulky. Is he Mech Fans Toys? I know there's a 1-to-1 knockoff combiner, but enough of that, we're here to talk about the kit. While you shouldn't go out and buy Hulky just to get this kit, if you already have him, or if you're not going to listen to me anyway and you're just going to get a KO regardless of how flawed he is, then the kit is a necessity. Word of warning, it doesn't quite work with the Wei Jiang upscaled version because the sizes don't match up and Jesslyn doesn't have that on hand, but if you own one of the originals or you're getting one of the knockoffs, get this kit. It does it a world of good. Yes, the Studio Ox design might not be to your liking, and yes, it does add an element of parts forming, but it's all for the benefit of the combined mode. It truly does fix 99% of the combined mode problems, and although I'm looking for a little bit more in a combiner, a little bit more nuance, a nuance that maybe the kit used and the main robot body didn't, it's still a really good display piece now that he has these parts. All in all, I'm very excited to see future projects from Jesslyn Bell. I'm rather intrigued to see where she goes from here, what other designs she does. She's got some interesting dropkick parts that I might buy later on from Shapeways. But, of course, this wasn't on Shapeways, this was just a garage printer. So for that, thank you very much. I very much appreciate it. And I think Hulky might finally be good enough. You know, one thing I can actually say about Hulky is that he exists. Can't say the same for the Mars Toys Seekers.